This is another Kremlin flop, yet again a missile, and yet again it failed to take off. Hello everyone, my name is Anastasiia Husarieva. I'm going to tell you exactly what went on in the Kremlin and why the entire Z community is concerned and what military experts are saying. But for now, please subscribe to our channel, give us a like, and leave a comment. It's easy for you, and we appreciate it. So let's proceed. Firstly, observe this photograph. This distinctive purple mushroom cloud was sighted on November 28th at the Yasny cosmodrome, situated in the Orenburg region, close to the Kazakh border. What would be the first thing to cross your mind if you saw something like that? Probably that Russia had started testing nukes, or that it had already launched one. That's exactly what was being discussed on various Telegram channels and in the media. In reality, a powerful explosion took place there during the testing of a genuine nuclear missile. The missile was slated to proceed to its subsequent testing phase. However, the launch culminated in an unfortunate incident, which for the Kremlin is certainly not a new development. And this particular video, specifically showing that exact launch, quickly disseminated across a multitude of Telegram channels. While you are watching, I will tell you. In the footage recorded by eyewitnesses, the missile launched from its silo, rose into the air, after which it began to burn, falling and breaking apart, leaving behind it a gigantic mushroom-shaped cloud of an orange-purple hue. The Ukrainian specialized publication, Defense Express, which concentrates on military analytics and defense sector news, states that this particular color, as you can now observe forming into this cloud, well, this marks the completion of another Russian missile test, as you can clearly observe. This very photo circulated through numerous media outlets and Telegram channels, and many sounded the alarm. So, returning to our topic, Defense Express, a publication specializing in military affairs, highlights such an explosion color is typical for missiles utilizing toxic fuel, particularly a combination of nitrogen tetroxide and unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine, commonly referred to as SHAML and heptalin. Based on all evidence, it is highly probable that a Sarmat missile was launched. That's the opinion of Pavel Podvig, a senior research fellow at the UN Institute for Disarmament Research. The Sarmat is a massive intercontinental missile, which you can now see displayed prominently on your screens. This missile weighs over 200 tons, and it possesses the capability to traverse nearly 18,000 kilometers. It's capable of carrying up to 15 nuclear warheads. That's dozens of HIROSHIMAs, for your information, in one single launch, capable of striking targets with an accuracy of a few hundred meters. At least those were its stated characteristics. The engines quickly lift the missile into the stratosphere, and at the end of its flight it accelerates to Mach 7 or 8, meaning it flies twice as fast as a bullet or covers the distance from Kiev to London in less than an hour. The Sarmat was conceived as an intelligent missile. It can trick missile defense systems with decoy targets, maneuver its warheads, and even fly an unconventional trajectory. There is no official information on the price of the Sarmat missile, as Russia has not disclosed its cost. But such missiles, by various estimates, are extremely costly given their use of cutting-edge tech and materials. Nevertheless, despite all these factors, we can still, at the very least, approximately estimate the magnitude of the expenditures involved in this endeavor. It is widely recognized that in its later stages of operation, the Sarmat was intended for deployment to launch satellites into Earth's orbit. The idea was to somehow recoup the billions invested. According to the Russian state space corporation Roscosmos, delivering 1 kilogram of cargo to orbit costs up to $17,000. The Sarmat can lift up to 10 tons, so one flight of such a cargo truck to space costs somewhere around $150 million. Even if we dismiss the extravagant advertising, the opulent presentations, the salaries of Rogozin and his associates, and all sorts of peculiar expenses, it still amounts to roughly 100 million per missile. It's a very rough estimate, but you can get an idea of the scale. Since 2013, Russia has been developing these multi-million-dollar missiles to replace outdated Soviet-era land-based missiles. Dictator Putin promised that the Sarmat would be delivered to the troops back in 2020. However, it failed to perform as intended. Moreover, it was poised to be the main symbol of Russia's nuclear might. But recent blasts revealed something else entirely. Rather than an invulnerable weapon, the world sees a project that appears impressive only on paper, but in truth is a mere dud. The previous failed attempt was last year. That was in September of 2024. The heavy intercontinental ballistic missile exploded right in its missile silo at the test site in the city of Plesetsk. That happened in the Arkhangelsk region. Consequently, the entire missile shaft and the testing complex were obliterated, leaving behind only an enormous crater. At that time, satellite images plainly showed the complete destruction of the test silo, and here is one such image for reference. Furthermore, military analysts were ultimately unable to precisely pinpoint the exact cause of that particular incident. There was, of course, quite a lot of discussion surrounding this matter, as is typical. Russia's Ministry of Defense offered no official comments on the incident, which was hardly unexpected. Apparently, after another failure, the Russians decided that the only more or less suitable place left for Sarmat launches was the cosmodrome in the Orenburg region on the border with Kazakhstan. That's exactly right, you heard correctly. The Sarmat missile's successful launch last year wasn't the first blunder for the Russians. And not even the second, as you might realize. But the first true fiasco actually occurred in February of 2023, precisely during the visit of the then President of the United States, Joe Biden, to Kyiv. Incidentally, here's one of those photographs. Was captured during that visit. U.S. officials reported the missile's flight was unsuccessful despite Moscow's prior notification to the U.S. via international channels to prevent conflict. This incident showed that even advanced next-generation missiles can produce unpredictable results, and the Sarmat's reliability still needs to be verified. However, there was one and only one supposedly real victory for this missile. In spring 2022, the Sarmat made its first complete flight from Plesetsk cosmodrome to Kamchatka, striking a training target over 5,000 kilometers away. Then the missile confirmed its range and accuracy, just as Putin announced in 2018. Essentially, this then established the foundation for the continued development of the supposedly invulnerable missile program, which also includes hypersonic systems. Behold, one of these is the Kinzhal and also the Avangard system, which is currently displayed before your very eyes on your screens. You can examine it in detail. Russia is currently deploying them in real combat operations, and we are well aware of this from direct experience. However, following that singular successful flight, the Sarmat missile was never again able to demonstrate its reliability. So it's more of a fluke than systematic work. All subsequent launches ended in explosions and failures. And so, in November 2025, the world again bore witness to another fiasco at the Yasny test site, as the missile detonated immediately after its launch. This sends a clear signal to the Kremlin. While their aspirations still exist, their actual implementation remains unproven in practice. Nevertheless, let's now revert our attention to this recent unsuccessful missile launch, which represents another Kremlin flop and a significant setback. What did this reveal to us? It demonstrated that even Moscow's most ambitious endeavors are susceptible to catastrophic failure. The Sarmat missile test has failed once more. This is the opinion of Etienne Marcus, a research fellow at the French Foundation for Strategic Research. He believes the missile urgently requires certification, given Putin's announcement that it would be delivered to the troops this year. The expert states that the missile impacted 1 kilometer from the missile silo, leaving behind a 70-meter crater. This is visible on satellite images. This time they tried to launch the missile towards the Kura test range in Kamchatka for the Yasny and Kura areas. Russia released an official notification to pilots regarding temporary restrictions and hazardous airspace zones within that region. And the fact of the matter is that no official information regarding any type of space launch was ever made public or communicated. Furthermore, local media outlets were advised to reach out to the Russian Ministry of Defense for further information. And no strategic nuclear forces exercises were announced either. And everything aligns perfectly if we make the assumption that these recent events were indeed another unsuccessful test of the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile, a weapon we have all observed, actively deliberated upon, and had analyzed by various experts. However, Even Russian experts are not entirely convinced that the missile involved in the incident was indeed a Sarmat. For example, Russian military expert Dmitry Kornev, who obviously supports the war against Ukraine, is not sure if the launch was a Sarmat missile after all. Well, nobody wants to concede defeat given how much Putin bragged about the Sarmat, but success remains elusive. Perhaps this is why he speculates that the Voyevoda missile underwent a failed test near the Orenburg region. Essentially, this is what that particular missile looks like. Or, as NATO classifies it, the Satan missile. This particular image displays one such missile. It's actually the oldest model Russia currently possesses, having been operational since the 1980s. And the key phrase here is precisely failed launch. Both of these missiles utilize liquid fuel, and that's precisely what created the orange and purple mushroom-like cloud. However, as is evident, even Russian military experts are in agreement. The launch proved to be unsuccessful, and there's simply no longer any room for making excuses. However, this specific VOEVODA missile was tested way back in 2013. That's according to Pavel Podvig, whom we've already mentioned, a senior research fellow at the UN Institute for Disarmament Research. As the expert points out, based on data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Russia's strategic missile forces had only 34 of these missiles left in their arsenal. Even if some VOEVODA missiles are still operational, it's highly unlikely the missile forces would choose to launch one. And this brings us back to the idea that Russian military experts are trying to explain away this Sarmat failure to smooth things over and ultimately to avoid falling out of favor with the Kremlin dictator. So the Yasny base is also home to the very latest avant-garde missile systems. However, those missiles use a hot launch from a missile silo, whereas the video captured a cold launch, which means a launch from the ground. By all appearances, this is another failure for the Sarmat program, and due to recent flops, it's highly unlikely the missile will be deployed in 2025, as bunker grandpa Putin claimed earlier this month. And such a fiasco for the Sarmat missile deals a serious blow to the reliability of Russian deterrence, casting doubt on the Kremlin's ambition to modernize its nuclear arsenal. However, the replacement of the outdated Voyevoda missiles, on which a large part of Russia's strategic warheads are concentrated, is being deferred to a later date. Moreover, their maintenance, previously conducted by Ukraine until 2014, is now seriously questionable. So noted Etienne Marcus, a research fellow at the French Foundation for Strategic Research, whom we've already mentioned. Overall, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Russia's strategic nuclear forces have 333 land-based missiles. These are mainly YARS systems, 206 units to be exact. Specifically, they are mobile, and each can carry 4 warheads, each weighing 250 kilotons. Russia additionally possesses 78 Topol missiles. This is what they look like, with a single 800 kiloton warhead. 12 avant-garde systems, we've talked about them, and about 3 dozen Voyevodas. The latter have 10 multiple warheads. Furthermore, according to data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Russia has 192 Sineva and Bulava submarine-launched ballistic missiles in its arsenal. Here's a photo provided by Wikipedia, but even this amount of cutting-edge technology doesn't save the Kremlin from embarrassing incidents. The latest explosion was another slap in the face to its dreams of nuclear greatness. And it is essential to highlight that this most recent unsuccessful launch of the Sarmat missile serves as further confirmation, providing additional proof that the persistent boasts and claims made by Putin continually fail to be substantiated by actual practical outcomes. This billion-dollar investment once again was unable to fulfill its primary function, to launch. The world will soon openly mock them. Moscow invents superweapon myths, but just gathers debris from its test sites. And the critical question persists. Will the Sarmat missile truly become a symbol of Russian strength, or will it perpetually remain the world's most costly fireworks, which the Kremlin still hasn't learned to ignite? Write your answers in the comments, and we'll see you in the next broadcast. I'm Anastasiia Husarieva. Stay safe, wash your hands, bye.